The man who fell on Fifth Avenue the afternoon had started like any other. The sidewalks of downtown Los Angeles bustled with tourists, office workers, and food trucks giving off the smell of grilled onions and warm tortillas, the hum of engines, the distant wail of sirens, and the laughter of children on a school trip mixed into a symphony of urban life. Keanu Reeves wore a plain gray hoodie, jeans, and a baseball cap pulled low. No one noticed him as he walked with a paper bag of groceries from the corner shop. He liked it that way. To most people, he was just another guy, quiet, polite, a lone dot, but then it happened. A loud thud. People turned. A man tall, uniformed, in his 50s had collapsed on the sidewalk just outside a bakery. His face twisted in pain, his hand clutched, his chest, his skin turned gray in seconds. A few people froze. Others screamed. A woman called 911. But Keanu dropped his groceries and ran. "Sir," he said, kneeling beside the man. "Can you hear me?" The officer tried to speak but couldn't. Keanu placed his fingers on his neck. Faint pulse, erratic. "He's having a heart attack." Keanu shouted. Nobody moved. He didn't wait. He took off his hoodie, folded it under the man's head, and rolled him gently onto his back. He tilted the officer's chin and began CPR. 30 compressions, to breaths, again. His hands didn't shake. His voice stayed calm. "Keep breathing. You're not going to die." A small crowd gathered. Phones came out. Someone recognized him. "Is that Keanu Reeves?" But no one interrupted. Sirens blared in the distance. A young man stepped closer. "I know CPR want help." "Yes," Keanu said, moving to the side. "You take compressions, I'll guide." Together, they worked. The ambulance arrived 5 minutes later. Paramedics rushed in. They took over fast, lifting the officer onto a stretcher, attaching oxygen, checking vitals. As they loaded him into the ambulance, one turned to Keanu. "You saved him," she said. "He wouldn't have made it another minute." Keanu just nodded. Then picked up his groceries. Now slightly squashed. The crowd clapped. But he didn't wait to be thanked. He disappeared down the sidewalk, the bag crinkling in his hand. Later that evening, news spread. A video had gone viral. Actor Keanu Reeves saves police officer's life on the street. Headlines followed. But Keanu stayed silent. At the hospital, the officer's name was revealed. Sergeant Frank Marlowe, 27 years on the force, a father of 2, grandfather of 1, a man known for being tough but fair. His daughter, Jessica Marlowe, writhed in tears. "He's alive?" she asked, clinging to the nurse's sleeve. "He's stable," the nurse said. "Someone did perfect CPR. Gave him a real shot." "Who?" "We think it was Keanu Reeves." Jessica blinked. "The actor?" The nurse smiled. "Yeah, that one." She walked into her father's room. Tubes, monitors, a heart that was still fighting. She took his hand. "You're not allowed to go yet," she whispered. "We've still got stories to tell." Meanwhile, Keanu sat alone in his kitchen. He didn't turn on the news. He didn't look at the trending posts. Instead, he opened a notebook and wrote a line with a quiet pen. "Some people fall without warning. Your job is to be ready when they do." He folded the paper and placed it in a box beside dozens of others. Then he sat in silence, not sad, not shaken. Just still. He didn't need applause. He just needed people to keep breathing. The next morning, a knock came at his door. He opened it to find Jessica Marlowe standing there. Her eyes were red, her voice low. "I'm sorry to come without calling. I asked around. Someone said you live here." Keanu stepped back politely. "Is your father okay?" "He's alive. Because of you." He nodded. "I'm glad. He wants to meet you," she said. "He's been asking." Keanu looked past her, at the sky turning silver with morning light. "I'll come by tomorrow," he said. "Give him time to rest." She reached into her coat and handed him something. It was a small badge. "His. You dropped it when you were helping him." Keanu looked down. It was an old pin from one of his charity events. He hadn't even noticed it had fallen. "Thank you," he said, pocketing it gently. Double quotes no. Jessica replied, "Thank you." That night, Keanu received a letter under his door. Handwritten. Short. You didn't just save my life, you reminded me what it's for. Frank Marlowe. Keanu read it 3 times, then smiled a little, because something was shifting, and he knew this was only the beginning. The visitor in uniform Keanu walked quietly through the hospital doors the next morning. He didn't wear sunglasses or try to hide. He simply carried a small bouquet of wildflowers he had picked from the trail behind his home. Nothing dramatic, just honest. Nurses noticed him. One whispered to another, "That's him." But no one stopped him. They could see it in his face. He wasn't there for attention. He was there for something real. Room for 06. He knocked gently before entering. Frank Marlowe lay in the bed, pale but alert, his eyes already fixed on the door. "You came," Frank said, his voice gravelly. Keanu nodded and stepped in. "Didn't want to be late." Frank grinned. "You're always early. Saved me before death could punch in." Keanu chuckled softly and set the flowers on the side table. They shook hands, and in that handshake, something passed between them, unspoken respect. 2 men who'd seen the edge, though from very different sides of life. "Do you remember anything?" Keanu asked. "Bits," Frank said. "The pain, mostly. Then your voice, steady, like someone flipping on a light in a pitch-black room." Keanu sat down. "You scared a lot of people." "I scared myself." A pause. Then Frank leaned forward, his eyes sharp. "I need to tell you something." Keanu listened. 3 days before the heart attack, I had started writing my retirement papers. I didn't tell anyone, not even my daughter. I was done. Burned out. Seen too much. Keanu tilted his head. "So what changed?" Frank pointed at him. "You." Keanu's brow furrowed. "Me. You didn't know me. You didn't ask if I deserved saving. You just did it. Something about that made me ask myself what else I've been giving up to." "Early," Frank smiled. "And that's why I asked for this meeting. I want to do something. Something big." Keanu leaned in. "What kind of something?" Frank's voice dropped to a whisper. "I want to fix the wall." Keanu blinked. "What wall?" Frank turned toward the window. "There's a wall at our precinct. It's meant to honor the fallen, but no one's updated it in years. Names left off, stories forgotten, mistakes swept under a rug." Keanu listened carefully. "If I'm going to retire," Frank said, "I want to leave something good behind, something honest, and I want you to help me." Keanu hesitated. "Me? You have eyes people trust, and you know how to build things quietly. I've seen your charity work, your shelters, your scholarship fund. You do things the right way." Keanu looked down, thinking, "If we do this," he said slowly, "we do it for the right reasons. Not for the press, not for politics, just truth." "Agreed," Frank said, his eyes burning with purpose. They shook hands again, and just like that, a project began. Over the next few weeks, Keanu visited the precinct, quietly and without ceremony. Some officers stared, others nodded. Captain Lewinsky, a strict woman known for her silence, gave him a simple handshake and a one-word greeting, respect. Keanu and Frank began reviewing files, collecting names of officers who had died in the line of duty but never received recognition, names lost in bureaucratic messes, names erased after controversy, names that still meant something to someone. They met widows, siblings, old partners. One man cried and said, "I thought no one remembered my brother." Another whispered, "It was like he never existed." Keanu took notes, handwritten, precise. He spent hours with Frank going through dusty boxes of files, old notebooks, and locker room stories passed down like folklore. Every name had a story. Every story had a cost. And behind each one, a family still waiting for peace. One night, after a long day, Keanu sat on Frank's porch. "You sure this is okay?" he asked. Frank sipped his tea. "What? Me doing this? I'm not a cop." Frank looked out into the dark. "No, you're not. But you're something we don't get much of anymore." "What's that?" A listener. Then came the twist no one expected. A sealed folder arrived from an anonymous source. Inside was a case file from 18 years ago. A name, Officer Peter Mallory. It said he had died during a drug bust gone wrong. But the report was strange, inconsistent. Frank frowned. "This file is incomplete." Keanu agreed. Something was missing. They dug deeper. Asked questions. And what they uncovered would change everything. Because Officer Mallory hadn't just died in the line of duty. He had been left behind. Intentionally. By someone still wearing a badge. And that someone was still working at the precinct. Keanu looked at Frank. What do we do? Frank's jaw tightened. We finish the wall. But first, we tell the truth. The name they tried to bear with file on Officer Peter Mallory sat between Keanu and Frank like a ticking clock. It wasn't just the incomplete statements or vague witness accounts. It was what wasn't there: the body cam footage missing, the sudden case closure, the unspoken silence wrapped around the entire incident like a thick fog. Frank tapped the folder. This case is cold, but it's not dead. Keanu leaned forward. Who signs off on a death report this then? Frank slid a yellowing report across the table. Lieutenant Dean Murphy, still on the force, 2 years away from retirement. Keanu, read it silently. Do you trust him? Frank hesitated, then shook his head. They began asking quiet questions. Keanu visited Peter Mallory's mother, who lived in a modest apartment, surrounded by old photos and unopened letters from the department. They stopped answering my calls after the funeral, she said softly. No medal, no ceremony, just silence. She held out Peter's badge, scratched and worn. He was proud. Too proud to speak up when he started seeing things that didn't sit right. What things? Keanu asked gently. She looked away. He wrote them in his journal, but it vanished the night he died. Keanu's jaw tightened. And they never gave it back. No, they told me it was never recovered. Frank reached out to an old friend at Internal Affairs. Off the record, the friend said, Mallory was asking the wrong questions, making noise about corruption. Then he was gone. Who was he investigating? Frank asked. The man paused. Can't say on record, but it's someone close to you. Keanu and Frank exchanged a look. They both knew. Dean Murphy. That night, Keanu couldn't sleep. He walked the quiet streets of Los Angeles with his hoodie pulled tight and his thoughts racing. This wasn't what he signed up for. He came to honor fallen officers, not uncover betrayal. But the truth didn't care about comfort. It needed light. The next morning, Frank called a meeting at the precinct. He stood in front of a dozen officers, many of whom had worked under Dean Murphy. Keanu stood beside him, quiet and watchful. We're building the memorial wall, Frank said. But there's a name missing, Peter Mallory, and we need to know why. Murmurs filled the room. Some looked away, others looked directly at Murphy, who stood in the corner with arms crossed. We were told he died in a failed raid, one officer said. Case closed, case buried, Frank replied. Not closed. Keanu stepped forward. This isn't about blame, it's about truth. Peter deserves that. Murphy spoke. You don't get to come in here, Hollywood, and stir up ghosts. Keanu didn't flinch. I'm not here for ghosts. I'm here for justice. Murphy's face darkened. That's rich, coming from a man who plays pretend for a living. Frank raised a hand. Enough. Silence fell. Then, unexpectedly, a young officer named Rojas stood. I was a rookie then, she said. Mallory helped me when no one else did. He told me things about officers taking bribes, stealing evidence. He was scared. He said he had proof. Frank looked at her carefully. Did you tell anyone? No, she whispered. I was afraid. Keanu stepped toward her and nodded. Thank you for speaking. Murphy stormed out of the room, but the silence he left behind spoke volumes. The next day, someone slid a package under Keanu's door. Inside was a USB drive and a handwritten note. He was right. This is the proof. Protect it. Keanu plugged it into his laptop. There were recordings. Mallory's voice. I found discrepancies in narcotics logs. Murphy signed off on shipments that never arrived. V told my superior, but now, my locker's been broken into. I don't feel safe. Keanu sat back. His hands were cold. He called Frank immediately. We need to go public, Keanu said. Frank was silent for a long moment. You realize what happens if we do? Yes, Keanu said, and I'm ready. They contacted Jessica Marlowe, Frank's daughter, who now worked as a local reporter. She listened to the files. Read the notes. And said one thing. I'll make sure the world hears this. 2 days later, The story broke. Headlines lit up every feed. Forgotten officer, hidden truth. Keanu Reeves and former sergeant exposed precinct cover-up. Dean Murphy was placed on immediate leave. An internal investigation reopened the Mallory file. And the mayor issued a public statement. We will restore the honor that was stolen from Officer Mallory. Keanu returned to Peter's mother's apartment. He handed her a folded letter. Inside was a formal invitation. We will add his name to the wall, with full honors. Tears filled her eyes. After all these years, she whispered, you brought him back to me. Keanu took her hand. He never left. But just when they thought the worst was over, a new threat emerged. Someone began following Frank. A shadowy figure parked near his home. Someone left a threatening message on his windshield. Stop digging, or you'll be next. Keanu found it first. He held the note in his hand and looked toward the dark street. His eyes were calm, but his voice was steel. They picked the wrong man to threaten. The threat behind the badge there around Frank Marlowe's home had changed. It was no longer peaceful. It was tight, tense like a wire pulled to hard. Frank sat by his window, his hand on a warm cup of coffee, but his eyes fixed on the unfamiliar sedan parked across the street. It had been there 3 nights in a row, always with dark-tinted windows, always leaving 5 minutes after the porch light went off. Keanu stood behind him, arms folded. They're trying to scare you, he said quietly. Frank nodded. And they're close, someone inside the department. Keanu's jaw tightened. Then we draw them out. The next morning, Keanu walked into the precinct. This time, he wasn't invisible. Cameras had made him famous again, but the men and women in that room saw something deeper now. He wasn't there for a headline. He was there for something bigger than himself. He stood in the break room with a file in his hand. Someone threatened Frank. He said, we're not naming names. We're asking for truth. This wall project, it's not just about remembering the fallen. It's about cleansing the rot. If you know something and stay quiet, you're helping it grow. Some officers looked down, but one older man, Detective Santiago, stood. Murphy had protection, he said, not just from inside, from City Hall. Keanu blinked. You mean politicians? Santiago nodded. Contracts, favors. Mallory had evidence that tied a supplier Elias Stone to dirty money, moving through the mayor's security office. Murphy was just a gatekeeper. Frank, who had quietly entered, looked at him. Why tell us now? Santiago sighed. Because Mallory died for this. And if you're willing to risk your life to finish what he started, then I should be willing to risk mine. Keanu took the new evidence and passed it to Jessica Marlowe. It's bigger than we thought, he said. You still want to publish more than ever, she said. But you need to be careful. Always am. She raised an eyebrow. You literally jumped into a burning building 2 months ago. He shrugged. The dog was scared. By week's end, Frank received an official visit from Internal Affairs. They handed him a protective notice. We've confirmed your address has been under surveillance, and there's been an attempt to access your department-issued phone records. Frank frowned. So we were right. They nodded. You and Reeves will both be assigned temporary security. Keanu shook his head. No cameras, no suits. Just keep an eye out. I don't want to spook people. Understood. That night, Keanu sat in his home, writing quietly in his journal. Each page held thoughts he never spoke aloud. This time, he wrote, truth has enemies, but it also has hands. Mine are open. Then, the fire came. At 16 a.m., Frank's house alarm went off. The neighbor saw smoke and called 911. Keanu, already awake from a bad dream, got the alert on his phone. He jumped into his truck and reached Frank's house in 7 minutes, faster than the fire trucks. When he arrived, the flames were licking the porch. Frank was already outside, coughing hard, holding a damp towel over his face, but there was shouting from inside. His daughter. Dad. Someone's still in there. Frank panicked. Jessica. Keanu didn't wait. He ran inside without hesitation. The heat hit him like a wall, but he moved fast, past the living room, through a hallway thick with smoke, to the study where Jessica had passed out near the floor, clutching a file box. He scooped her up, tucked the box under one arm, and burst through the side door. just as the roof began to groan. Outside, firefighters took over. Jessica woke slowly, coughing. Her eyes widened. You saved me again." Keanu smiled faintly. "Twice in 1 year. That's a record." Frank clutched both of them in his arms. He didn't cry, but his voice broke. "You're not just helping me finish the wall. You're saving everything that matters to me." The next day, the official investigation confirmed it. The fire had been arson. A gas line had been tampered with, and footprints at the scene matched a boot issued only to certain tactical units. Keanu looked at Frank. "They're getting desperate." Frank nodded. "Good. That means they're afraid." On the day of the memorial wall's unveiling, over 200 people gathered at the precinct courtyard. Framed by sunlight and rows of candles, the new wall bore 27 names, each one previously ignored, erased, or denied. But front and center, freshly engraved in stone, was Officer Peter Mallory, end of watch, June 12, 2006. His mother stood in front of it, her fingers gently touching the name. Frank took the podium. His voice carried across the silence. "We honor truth today, not just bravery, not just service, but the kind of truth that lives beyond death." He paused, "And if not for one man, one outsider, one citizen, one human being with a brave heart, we wouldn't be standing here now." He turned to Keanu. "He doesn't wear a badge, but he lives like he does." The crowd clapped. Some wept. But Keanu didn't wave. He didn't speak. He just bowed his head and looked at the wall. Because it wasn't about him. It was about what we choose to remember, and what we refuse to let stay buried. Asterisk the badge beneath the shafter. The memorial ceremony. Things did not settle down. In fact, they began to heat up. Jessica single quotes S article about the hidden corruption backed by Mallory's recordings, precinct files, and Santiago's testimony went viral. It wasn't just a local scandal anymore. It became a national headline. News anchors said, "Keanu Reeves helps expose decades-old cover-up in LAPD." Citizens marched in front of City Hall, holding signs that read, "Justice for Mallory and truth doesn't expire." Keanu stayed quiet, refused interviews, turned down every podcast, show, and documentary. He wasn't interested in fame. He was only interested in finishing what they started. But not everyone wanted the truth to come out. An anonymous source leaked an old photograph. It showed Mallory at a party years ago, with someone later convicted of drug trafficking. Suddenly, a new wave of headlines hit the internet. Was Mallory clean, hero cop, or hidden traitor? Frank slammed the paper down. "They're trying to rewrite his story again." Keanu nodded. "They're scared of the truth, so they're trying to dirty the pages." Jessica called. "I've traced the photo's metadata. It's been doctored, and it came from a private email server tied to the mayor's re-election campaign." Frank narrowed his eyes. "They're getting sloppy." Keanu said, "Then we use it." They prepared a press package. But not just a denial. It was a full expose showing the corruption trail, from Murphy to the mayor's office, including financial transactions, audio files, and witness statements. Jessica single quotes S Network scheduled a primetime release. But just before it aired, the network pulled the story. Frank was stunned. "Why?" Jessica's face was pale. "They got to our executives, threatened funding." Keanu didn't shout. He didn't argue. He just picked up his phone and made one call. "Let's post it ourselves," he told Jessica. "No networks, no filters, straight to the people." They uploaded the video to a public channel titled Truth Doesn't Fade. Within 1 hour, it hit 1 million views. By morning, it reached 5. By the end of the week, over 15 million people had watched. In the video, Keanu's voice spoke clearly. "This isn't about me. This isn't about revenge. This is about a man who was forgotten, a man who asked hard questions, and a system that tried to erase him." He paused. "We won't let that happen again." The public response was massive. Pressure mounted on the city officials. The mayor resigned under investigation. Dean Murphy was arrested, and a new district attorney reopened multiple closed cases from the past 20 years. But then something unexpected happened. Someone broke into Keanu's home. They didn't steal anything. They just left a single object on his table. An old badge. It belonged to Officer Mallory. Scratched, dented, but real. Beneath it, a note written in sharp black ink. He would have wanted you to have this. Keanu stared at it for a long time. He sat in silence, letting the weight of the moment press down on his chest. He whispered, "I'm not worthy." Behind him, Frank stepped in. He didn't ask for perfect, he said softly. He asked for someone who wouldn't look away. Keanu picked up the badge and held it to his heart. In the days that followed, Keanu and Frank used the momentum to launch something new. The Mallory Initiative, a non-profit dedicated to reviewing forgotten or buried service records, helping families of fallen officers receive recognition, and supporting reform within law enforcement agencies. Their motto was simple: no name left behind. In their first 3 months, they helped 5 families receive medals of honor for loved ones ignored for decades. One woman wrote, "I thought my brother had been erased. Thank you for making him visible again." But even in these victories, the pain remained. One evening, as Keanu walked alone near the river where he first met Frank, he stopped. He looked at the sky, glowing purple from the city lights. He whispered to no one, "Thank you for collapsing that day," because that moment had changed everything. Because a stranger's pain had become the beginning of something much greater. The story of Keanu and Frank spread beyond America. In Japan, a police academy played clips from the memorial ceremony in their ethics class. In India, a family started a similar wall in honor of social workers lost during the pandemic. In Brazil, a retired officer mailed Keanu a coin that read, "Honor above all." People were listening. People were remembering. Because truth, once set free, doesn't stop moving. And yet, the most powerful moment came 1 month later. At the precinct, a young officer named Alicia asked to speak privately with Keanu. She looked nervous. Then she said, "My father died during a rescue mission in '99. He was listed as a casualty of negligence. But I found letters that say otherwise. Letters that prove he was following orders. Dangerous ones." She looked down. "I never had the strength to speak up until now." Keanu took her hand. "You're not alone anymore." Because the badge they tried to bury was shining again. Asterisk. The last name on the wall. Wind that morning was soft and warm, the kind that carried memories through open spaces. At the precinct courtyard, sunlight fell gently on the polished black granite of the memorial wall. The final name had just been added. Keanu stood in front of it, his hands in his pockets, sunglasses shielding his tired eyes. Beside him stood Frank Marlowe, whose recovery from the heart attack months ago was nothing short of miraculous. But more than his heart had been repaired, his spirit had returned too. The name beneath Mallory's read, Officer Evelyn Grace Alvarez. End of watch, March 4, 1999. It was the father of Alicia, the young officer who had come forward. Her hands trembled as she touched the wall, but Keanu stood behind her, steady, like a shadow of quiet strength. "You brought him back," she whispered. Keanu shook his head gently. "You did. I just held the flashlight." The world had changed. In small, invisible ways, the Mallory Initiative grew faster than anyone expected. Within 6 months, it had spread across 12 states, with precincts voluntarily opening old case files. Families received long overdue letters. Fallen heroes had their names returned to the world. Keanu stayed in the background. He never took the mic, never signed the papers publicly. But he was always there at the quiet ceremonies, behind the cameras, near the candles. He once told Frank, "Fame is loud, truth is quiet. I'd rather live in the quiet." But the story didn't end there. One afternoon, while walking through a small coffee shop downtown, Keanu noticed an elderly man sitting alone with a folded piece of paper on the table. He looked up as Keanu passed and gave a weak nod. Keanu paused. The man opened the paper. It was a Polaroid, a young officer, uniformed, standing beside Peter Mallory, "My brother." The man said quietly, "They said he was corrupt. They were wrong." Keanu sat down without asking. For the next hour, they talked, not about revenge, not about shame, but about memory. Because sometimes healing begins with being heard. The mayor's office, under new leadership, invited Keanu and Frank to City Hall. A press conference was scheduled. Cameras everywhere. When the mayor stepped forward, he said, "For years, our systems failed. They erased names, rewrote stories, and broke families. But one man who didn't wear a badge, who didn't seek power, chose to stand in the gap." He turned to Keanu. "On behalf of the city, we honor your courage." He held out a small, gold medallion engraved with a single word, "Guardian." The crowd stood. Applause thundered. But Keanu said nothing. He only bowed once, then looked up with tears in his eyes. That night, sitting on the steps of the precinct, Keanu and Frank watched as candles flickered along the memorial wall. A small girl, no older than 7, approached with her mother. She looked up at Keanu and whispered, "Did you really save all those names?" Keanu knelt beside her. "I didn't save them," he said gently. "I just helped people remember." She smiled. "That's still saving." Weeks later, Jessica Marlowe published her final story in the series. It ended with these words: "When a man collapses from a heart attack on a city sidewalk, most walk past, one didn't. And from that one moment, an entire system was challenged. A family was healed, and the silence was broken." This is not a story about a movie star. This is the story of what happens when kindness refuses to stay quiet. Keanu returned home that night, exhausted in the best way. He passed the mirror, paused, and quietly placed Mallory's old badge in a glass frame, setting it on a shelf next to a candle. As he walked away, the flame flickered gently. Like a life, once lost, now remembered. Because sometimes the biggest shock to the world isn't a scandal or a secret. It's a quiet act of goodness that refuses to die.